Yo, we're over here now. And today we're talking about Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization, which is the strength and fitness program which I published on Instagram, on Unreal Fitness's Instagram yesterday. Before I get into the program and talking you through how to use the program, I did want to say some things for clarity. First, the training methods in this program are simply a new spin on old methods. When it comes to general strength and fitness programs, the real best program is the one you are doing. By that I mean general strength and fitness programs are simply adherence tools that help one stay consistent and organize their training in a reasonable manner. This does help make more gains, as consistency is king and reasonable training generally outperforms unreasonable training. 2. There are plenty of programs that are just as great, but they're organized in different ways and for different reasons. For example, 531 is a weekly undulating periodization which includes AMRAPs and an autoregulation mechanism. As well, Grayskull LP is a linear periodization program which features AMRAPs and an autoregulation mechanism that is very similar to what's presented in Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization. The difference is 531 is a somewhat rigid, weekly undulating periodization, while Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization is a less rigid linear periodization. Grayskull LP is linear periodization for contest prep. All that being said, your muscle doesn't give a shit how we classify the programs. It just needs to be challenged thoroughly and frequently, preferably in a way that makes you feel good. 3. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization is a novel attempt at making an exercise program which tries to accomplish a few things in as few words as possible. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization reduces programming to a relatively short series of instructions while also being comprehensive enough to be effective for nearly anyone and for an arbitrarily long time, years or decades. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization combines linear periodization with AMRAPs, so every training session is as difficult as you need it to be, and PRs can be tracked frequently. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization uses autoregulation to create cycles of intensity which allow for recovery from the most intense sessions while also training bar speed, volume, and maximum strength in that order over time. And finally, Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization allows you to train general strength and performance with no 1-rep maxing. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization encourages athletes to target no fewer than 3 reps. All right, let's get into it. Linear periodization is an exercise programming method which isolates a single performance metric that is then plotted to increase in a linear manner over time. These linear periods are punctuated by maximum intensity training sessions and a subsequent re-evaluation of variation, amount of resistance, and the rate at which resistance increases. All right, so this is a short and perhaps erudite way to say that when the weights get too heavy, we lower them. By far, the most common performance metric used to plot these programs is resistance, or weight. This metric is isolated by increasing the weight incrementally over time while the set and rep schemes remain the same. This makes a program that is predictable, effective, and has a high potential to produce regular personal records. AMRAP is an acronym, as many reps as possible. This rep scheme asks the trainee to perform as many repetitions as they are capable of before failure. Take note of the phrase, before failure. Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization encourages trainees to end their AMRAP sets before the failure rep. While the actual number of reps in an AMRAP may vary wildly one AMRAP is always equal to one AMRAP. Thus, AMRAPs are compatible with linear periodization as the rep scheme, AMRAP, remains the same and weight is allowed to increase over time. For general strength and fitness, the combination of linear periodization and AMRAPs gives every trainee the opportunity to get everything they can out of each training session. With the inclusion of AMRAPs in a linear periodization program, there is no more reason to worry about the opportunity cost of training with lighter weights at the beginning of a program. Also, regular AMRAPs mean frequent opportunities to track progress and personal records. These opportunities multiply, as linear periodization requires an athlete to train several different amounts of resistance within a range and over time. Within this text, variation refers to exercises that are similar to other exercises or are appropriate as compound accessory exercises for the relative primary lift. For example, a safety bar squat is a variation of the squat. As another example, for the purpose of this program, a good morning could serve as a variation of the deadlift. All right, so next we're going to get into the actual instructions of the program, which is, step by step how to form your Unreal Infinite linear periodization program. At the same time, we'll go through the spreadsheet. So to start, I'm going to go over here, and we've got my example program, which I've been training for a handful of weeks now. And we're just going to make a copy, but this right here. All right, so we make a copy. Bam. So now we got a new one that we can edit freely, but still has the formulas in the body of the spreadsheet. So now this is no longer Jay's program, it's your program. You dig? All right. Step 1. Select one primary variation. Step 1. Select one primary variation and one secondary variation for each of the squat, deadlift, bench press, and overhead press. All right. So we've got our primaries here. This is the label: squat, deadlift, bench press, and overhead press. And we're going to choose our first variation. Now, let's say we want to do safety bar squat as our primary squat. So this is the safety bar squat is going to be the squat that we're doing in the program as our squat. This is our back squat, this is our front squat, this is the primary squat we're doing for the program, okay? But just for this example, it's going to be a safety bar squat, okay? And for the deadlift, let's call it a axle deadlift. Now, I mean, that might mean different things to you, but it doesn't matter. It's just an example, okay? And for our bench press variation, incline bench press. And for our overhead press variation, we can do like log push press. All right. Okay, so your secondary variation is going to be the first exercise that you do after your primary exercise. If it's a squat day, it's going to be something similar to or accessory to the squat. If it's your deadlift day, it's going to be something similar to or accessory to your deadlift. All right, so in this column here, variation 2, we're going to select our secondary variations. So for our friend here, his secondary variation for his squat could be, let's call it walking lunges. His secondary variation for his deadlift could be barbell rows. His incline bench press secondary variation could be weighted dips. And his log push press secondary variation could be standing dumbbell press. Okay, now we're going to select the set rep scheme. This program recommends beginners start with 5x5 and lifters with sound technique start with 1x20. But that's just a recommendation, okay? The actual rules are any set rep scheme with at least 18 reps per session and no fewer than 3 reps per set is acceptable. 75 reps per session is an absolute maximum. Very high volume on primary lifts should coincide with low or no accessory volume. The final set of any given set rep scheme should be an AMRAP or 20 reps, whichever comes first. All right, so we're going to make a set rep scheme for each of these primary lifts according to these rules. All right. Now I've got one AMRAP in my program here, but we're going to change it just, because we're learning how to use the program. Okay. Let's say this person is not insane, so they don't want to do necessarily 20 rep sets. They want to go a little more intense than that, so they're going to do, something crazy like 3x10. Okay? And so they're just going to do 3x10 for all of their exercises here. Now, obviously, you don't have to do 3x10 for all of them. You can put whatever rep schemes you want in here. The point is that these rep schemes just have to stay the same while you are increasing the weight, while you're modulating the weight. The point is these set and rep schemes have to stay the same while your weight is going up over time. And that's linear periodization. Just because you're doing different sets and reps on your deadlift than your bench press doesn't mean it's not linear periodization. You can, like I said, do whatever sets of reps you want here. I think it's very reasonable to do 3x10. But don't forget that the final set of any given set rep scheme should be an AMRAP. So even if you put whatever in here, 3x10 or 5x5 or whatever, the last set is an AMRAP. The last set of your primary lift for that day is an AMRAP. So your last set of squats, your last set of deadlifts, last set of bench press, last set of overhead press, that's an AMRAP. Doesn't matter if the rep scheme says 3x10, the last set is an AMRAP. And I'm going to say it one more time, okay? Just so nobody forgets. Even in this situation, your last set of safety bar squats, your last set of axle deadlifts, your last set of incline bench press, your last set of log push press for the day is an AMRAP. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Next, we're going to set the starting weights for primary exercises somewhere between an empty bar and 50% of 1 rep max. All right, so we do start the program somewhat light, and you'll understand why we can get away with that even if you're very strong here very soon. But this guy, he doesn't want to start his program as light as I did because he's pretty strong. And so he's going to start his program with something like a 225-pound safety bar squat, a 275-pound axle deadlift, a 185-pound bench press, and a 110-pound log push press. And then on step 4, we're going to select the rate of resistance increase for each primary lift, somewhere between 5 pounds per week or 20 pounds per session. Note that the fastest rate is 8 times faster than the slowest and results in 2,080 pounds of increase per year. This means the athlete will encounter challenge in the primary lift much more quickly, and the total time of linear periodization before reset will be shorter. The slowest rate adds 260 pounds per year and will result in longer total time in linear periodization, given the range. All right, so that rate is here. So just, for clarity, this is the amount of weight we're adding per session. As we revisit each primary exercise, twice a week. Each primary exercise has 2 sessions a week. That means we're increasing the weight twice a week. So at a rate of 20, you're going to gain 40 pounds on your working weight for your squat every week. And that sounds pretty good for our friend here. He's pretty strong, so he thinks he can keep that up for, at least 4 weeks, but, maybe longer. The same thing for the deadlift. 20 pounds, starting at 275, that's going to be easy for our guy. The incline bench press with 10 pounds, he'll be able to progress the bench press for a while at that rate, but it's not going to be so aggressive that his program is going to end on the incline bench press super fast. And the same thing with the overhead press. The log push press is a pretty strong movement. Maybe he could do better than 5 pounds a session, but this is just an example. So we're just going to stick with the 5 pounds a session example so you can see the table doing the work. Okay? All right, step 5. We're going to set the relative rate of resistance for your secondary variations. This value represents the total weight of the secondary variation as a portion of the primary variation. For most variations, this value should be somewhere between 0.5 and 1.1. However, some combinations of primary and secondary variations may ask for anywhere from 0.1 to 2.0. For example, if the primary variation is a back squat and the secondary variation is a front squat, then an appropriate relative rate might be somewhere between 0.6 and 0.9. A more extreme example might be deadlifts and walking lunges, where a relative rate of 0.1 or 0.2 might be appropriate, while 0.3 could be somewhere between very challenging and impossible. Sometimes it is appropriate that the secondary variation be heavier than the primary, such as in the case of the barbell bench press and the barbell board press. In such a case, a value of 1.05 to 1.15 could be appropriate as a relative rate of resistance. The relative rate for each of these, but honestly, this portion here, you're going to have to use some judgment. There's no way I could ever produce a guide that comprehensively compares the relative intensity across all different exercises. But, you can make a reasonable decision. You can go maybe a little lighter than you might think you need, and then let the linear periodization do the work bringing that weight up over time, and let the AMRAPs do the work of providing you with that thorough challenge that you need to make progress. All right, so let's say safety bar squat to walking lunges, okay? We're going to do a 0.2 relative rate. I think the walking lunges, you probably do about 20% of your safety bar squat in a walking lunge for a strong athlete. Axle deadlift to barbell rows. This one, it's going to vary quite widely depending from person to person. But I think that for a strong guy, I think a 0.5 for the barbell rows is probably appropriate. Incline bench press versus weighted dips. Now, obviously, weighted dips are different because they're not barbell loaded. Like the rest of these exercises, you're lifting your own body weight as well, in a more significant manner than, say, the squat demands, sort of. But you can still use a relative rate to come up with a reasonable value that's going to put you in a good range of resistance in order to make great gains with AMRAPs. And for me, that probably sounds something like 0.2 or maybe even 0.3. Log push press versus standing dumbbell press. Now, for the case of dumbbell exercises symmetrical dumbbell exercises, which take 2 dumbbells at a time in order to perform the whole compound exercise. We are going to treat the combined weight of both dumbbells as the value we're working with. So when we talk about the dumbbell weight, we're not talking about one dumbbell at a time inside this spreadsheet. We're talking about the combined total weight of the dumbbells. Okay. And in this case, this person should probably do something like 0.4, maybe 0.5, but probably more like 0.3 or 0.4. So the next one, we're going to select 2 or 3 accessory exercises for each primary, emphasizing exercises which require the improvement of weaknesses. Program must include one or more of the following: reverse hyper, back raise, or glute ham raise. All right, so we're going to get some accessory exercises in here. These no longer have to be compound movements. And we're going to try to target our friend's weaknesses. And we're going to include reverse hyper, back raise, or glute ham raise at least once in the program. One of these exercises must appear at least one time in the program. If you're not doing one of these exercises at least once a week, you are not doing Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization. That is one of the few very hard and fast rules in this program. The program must include reverse hyper, back raise, or glute ham raise. Preferably multiple times a week, but you need to get them in. Anyway, let's pick our accessories. Now, our friend here, he's a fire breather. He wants all the work he can get. He doesn't want to miss out on a single rep that coach will allow him to do. So, he's going to fill up all 12 accessory slots, okay? For squat, we could do something like the typicals. We've already done the squats. We've done the walking lunges. So we've done a lot of pressing our knee out. We might as well do leg extension, leg curl, reverse hyper. All right. So for his deadlift, his accessories, like I said, we're going to fill it up. Something like adductor machine, abductor machine, glute ham raise. All right, for his bench press, we love pull-ups. Of course we love pull-ups. We already did the weighted dips. We did bench press, so we've already done a lot of pressing, so we're going to do the self-supported one-arm row and a 3-way shoulder raise. And for his overhead press day, dumbbell pull-overs, we can do curls and hanging leg raise. This program recommends 10 to 60 minutes of LISS every day and 1 session of 3 to 10 rounds of HIIT each week. This program recommends incline treadmill walking and hill sprints or sled pushing. This is optional, but will vastly improve results for nearly all trainees. So that's just over here. Remind yourself every day, and if not every day, then at least every training day. And if not every training day, then at least once a week, you're going to do 10 to 60 minutes of low-intensity, steady-state cardio. Like I said, I recommend incline walking on the treadmill. But for me, I want a little more, so I put the step mill on my program. Our friend here, they also want a little more, so they're going to do the step mill. For HIIT, I've been doing sled. Our friend likes HIIT. He's going to do sled. All right. So as you can see, we've filled out the program. We've got our rates in, our starting weights, our sets and reps. We picked all of our variations. And now the program has populated, the spreadsheet has populated 4 weeks of programming. And all I have to do is show up and do these workouts. As you can see, we started with relatively light weight, which is represented in this first week, but we chose very aggressive progressions for our lifts. And by the end of the program, you can see that the safety bar squat is much heavier. The deadlift is much heavier. So even though the weight started humble, depending on the way you set the program up, it can aggressively increase in intensity. Of course, it can also gently increase in intensity. And it's what do you want out of the program? That's why it is the way it is. All right, so in a 4-session cycle, each primary lift is represented twice in an upper-lower split. Accessory exercises are represented once or twice, as squat day and deadlift day may not have the same accessories. The same goes for bench day and overhead press day. Day 1 is squats and deadlifts. Day 2 is bench and overhead press. 3 is deadlifts and squats. 4 is overhead press and bench. So we're revisiting each primary exercise twice a week, but also each primary exercise gets to be the main focus of the day once a week. All right, so then we're going to plot the training across the next few weeks, adding the rate of resistance increase each session after the first. All right, so we've already done that because we followed the instructions in the program. We made a copy of the spreadsheet. We followed the instructions in the program, and now we have this plot, which represents step 9 here. Step 10 is perform the training as prescribed in the program, adding resistance according to the rate of resistance increase and adding to the plot some weeks ahead of training in order to anticipate schedule changes and PRs. So when you get to week 4, day 4, you've completed the 4-week block, you go back up here and you punch in your last weights on that last week, and they go up here in this starting weight. And then you continue the program. Now, you can see how this program is going to continue to get harder pretty quickly. And this guy is going to need a reset before too long, at which point he's going to reduce his weight between 15% and 50%, and he's going to bring these rates down on whatever exercise which forced him to have to reset the weights. Okay, so let's just do that for an example here. We're going to update the table with our week 4 weights. So our squat ended at 365. Now, you'll notice that on week 4, day 1, the squat was actually 345, but we also did week 4, day 3, which does count as another squat day, even though there's no squats in it. For the purpose of the program, it does still count as a second squat day. And so the starting weight is 365. And then we look at the incline bench press. The incline bench press, the final one is 235. Again, we hit the upper body again later that week. So we're going to add another rate to the incline bench press. So that's going to become 245. We're just adding that 10 to it again. All right. Week 4, day 3, we did axle deadlift at 415. Now, we did not revisit the deadlift again after that and before programming this program again. So we're just going to put 415 in here for deadlift. And finally, the log push press ended at 150. We did not revisit upper body day before programming the next 4 weeks. So we don't have to add another rate. We just put the 150 right in there. So now, if we look back at the table again, we can see the safety bar squat is quite a bit heavier. The whole program is way heavier now. And that's the point. That's linear periodization. So, how long can you keep it up? And then once you find your limit, you reduce your weight and you find out how many reps you can get at the reduced weight. All right. Step 11, try to avoid failure reps. Do not take AMRAPs to failure. Always try to put the weight away before the failure rep. Imagine AMRAP -1 if necessary. So this one's important. Okay, so the failure reps are not what Unreal Infinite linear periodization is encouraging. This program is encouraging people to have successful training reps which end in training sessions where the athlete is not injured. And I guess that's all I have to say about that. Step 12. When failure to complete the prescribed set rep scheme occurs, reduce the weight by 15% to 50% and reduce the rate of resistance by at least one step. For example, reduce 20 pounds per session to 10 pounds per session, or 5 pounds per session to 2.5 pounds per session. 2.5 pounds per session is the slowest recommended progression. Let's say our guy here is a fucking badass and he champs the 365 squat. He champs the 415 deadlift. But then on the next week, we've got a 405 squat for 3x10. And that's just more than our friend here can handle. So he does attempt this training session, but he doesn't get at least 3x10. He gets maybe one set of 8 or less, or maybe he gets 3 sets deep, but on the third set only gets 8. Doesn't matter. This is too much, so he needs to reduce the weight. Now, our guy, he's ambitious. He wants to go places. He wants to go there quickly. So he doesn't feel that beat up from the training yet. He still feels pretty good. So we're not going to cut by 50%. We're just going to cut by 15%. Our boy made it to 405. So we're going to take that 405 and we're going to cut that by 15%. Well, 15 times 4 is 60. So we're going to go down to, we're going to call it 345 pounds. And we're going to reduce that rate to 10. Now when he encounters his squat next, a little bit lighter, easier to deal with. We already got this 365 for 3x10 once. So now he's going to get a chance to reset his AMRAP on that third set. And the rate is a little slower. So instead of just going for that 405, we just failed a handful of weeks ago. We're going for 385. So we can try to secure the PR. All right, step 13, the final step. For exercises using the slowest progression, when failure to complete the prescribed set rep scheme occurs, select a new variation of that primary exercise and start the program over for that lift. For example, the overhead press could change to push press, log press, or dumbbell press. The squat could change to front squat, pause squat, or safety bar squat. There are a ton of viable variations for each primary, including different methods of accommodating resistance. Attempt to choose variations which challenge your weaknesses. And I mean, that's it. That's the program. To reiterate on this last part, once our friend here, he's going to reset his deadlift, So let's say he has to reset his deadlift to 365, and then he's got to reset his squat again. All right. So we're going to set the squat to 350 because he did a little bit better this last time. And the rate is going to come down. And then, he's going to do it again. And finally, we're going to have the biggest one. We're going to say he did a little bit better again. The squat goes up to 355 as the base rate, and the rate goes to 2.5. Okay. Now, when he caps out this rate, it is absolutely time to change variation. When the weight gets so heavy that he can't do the prescribed 3x10 anymore, then Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization recommends you change variation and restart the program with a new variation. Okay. Now, you don't have to go all the way down to the slowest rate and exhaust the slowest rate to change variation. You can change variation any time that you fail to meet the prescribed minimums. So if you set the program for 3x10 and you don't meet a 3x10, once the weight gets to a certain point, then at that point you can change variation if you want. That's fine. Now, you shouldn't be changing variation too often, but shit happens, things change, things happen. So Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization gives you common opportunities to change variations. But the point is, once you get down to this super slow rate, this 2.5 rate, and you max this out, you got to change variations. You need to do something else because you are approaching a plateau. So you got to break that plateau by choosing a variation that targets your weaknesses and rerunning the program. All right, so now that we've talked completely about the program, we've completely covered everything about like the function of the program, what it's for, how to use it. And we can finish up by talking about the advantages and disadvantages of infinite periodization compared to some other training programs. 1. By starting with light weights and cutting resistance 15% to 50%, when the weights get too heavy, the program auto-regulates for periods of training speed, technique, volume, and intensity. 2. AMRAPs provide adaptation-inducing challenge even with light weights. 3. AMRAPs combined with linear periodization serve as testing to track performance improvement very frequently. 4. No testing outside of AMRAPs. 5. Freedom of exercise choice. 6. Eliminates the question of when to change variations. 7. Auto-regulation mechanism can be used to quickly identify plateaus and subsequently address the limitation with variation. 8. Inexhaustible options allow the program to evolve with the athlete. The last program one may ever need, even as one's needs and goals change. And 9. Generalized strength and fitness for all levels. Linear periodization isn't just for beginners anymore. The disadvantages of Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization. The auto-regulation mechanism will eventually force the intensity of each exercise to be out of sync. This is a problem that, say, 531, for example, does not have. 531's weakly undulating periodization is rigid enough to where the exercises are never out of sync. One of the primary goals of 531 is that you're nearly always in sync with your exercise intensities. This program can be addressed somewhat with AMRAPs when the weights are light, but ultimately make this program a long-term general strength and fitness program. This is not a contest prep program. So the auto-regulation mechanism in Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization will force each exercise into a range of intensity that is compatible with that individual in that period. But this also means that sometimes some of their lifts are going to be very heavy, other of their lifts are going to be very light, and sometimes all of their lifts are going to be very heavy, and sometimes all of their lifts are going to be very light. This is not really a problem, as training at different levels of intensity is very important for everyone to make progress in strength and fitness, but it can be uncomfortable for some people sometimes because the different exercises in different days simply, their intensity simply is not relative to one another, except for that your body demands it to be as you fail to meet the minimums prescribed in the program and are forced to reset, which isn't a problem, again, is the function of the program. It's just the way it works. And finally, the ultimate disadvantage of Unreal Infinite Linear Periodization, the one thing that so many people I know will be dismayed by, disappointed by, is no testing 1-rep maxes. Again, this is not a contest prep program. No one really needs to do 1-rep maxes for strength and fitness training. For the purposes of improving your maximum strength, for the purposes of improving your absolute fitness and athletic ability, 1-rep maxes are unnecessarily dangerous. It's as simple as that. You can do a 3-rep max, you do a 4-rep max, you can do a 5-rep max, and all of those will be safer and more effective for actually inducing the adaptations that people who train for strength and fitness are looking for. And finally, the short version, the absolute shortest way that I could think to present the ideas to you. That is to say, execute linear periodization with last set AMRAPs until failure. Reset by 50% and consider changing variations. It's that simple. It's really that simple. All right, guys. I appreciate it. I hope you guys appreciate the program. I would love to hear even just one other person tell me they're giving it a shot. This program is very similar to how I've trained for so much of my time I've spent in the gym, and it is admittedly an amalgamation of the lessons I've learned from people who have contributed much more to the strength and fitness community than I have so far. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I thank them for giving me the privilege to have the knowledge and ability to present this to you. Thank you.